Hey everybody, it's Coach Mike with Elite Performance and welcome to my channel. I wanted to talk to you today about stress and how stress negatively affects the body in several different ways. Before I get into it, first we need to define stress. And stress simply defined is, tension or pressure on something, all right? In humans, there are two types of stress. All right, we have to differentiate. There is eustress, which is good stress. Eustress could be defined as exercise, eating a healthy diet, meditation, things like that. Those are all good stresses to place onto the body. But then there's distress. Now, distress is what most of us refer to when we're talking about stress. It's the bad stuff, okay? And it's distress that I want to talk about, all right? So understand that there are two stresses. There's a stress that's good on the body, but then there's a stress that is bad on the body, and it is distress that we want to talk about. Let's go back to the late 1960s and look at the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, right? In the late 1960s, Dr. Lipton was doing stem cell research, and a lot of things. He was doing a lot of things when it comes to stem cell research. And one of the things that he was doing was he would take some cells and put them in a petri dish, and on the opposite side of the petri dish, he would put food. All right, so you leave, and he comes back and observes, and he sees that the cells are moving closer to the food, right? Well, then he would put cells into a different petri dish, and on the opposite side, instead of putting food, he would put a toxin. And again, after time spent away, he comes back and he observes that the cells are moving away from the toxins. Okay, now this sounds simple, but it's profound because you're made up of cells. All of us are. We're made up of somewhere between 50 trillion and 100 trillion cells, right? And at a cellular level, what Dr. Lipton was able to demonstrate was cells pretty much behave in one of two ways that are observable, all right? They either move towards something, they're growing, or they move away from something, they're in protection. So at a cellular level, cells are only doing two things: growing or protecting. And protecting is distress. Okay? Now, distress always takes place outside of the body. It never takes place inside of the body. Nothing that happens inside of the body causes distress, because things that happen inside of the body, the immune system pretty much wipes those out before you even know that they exist. Right? So stress comes from outside. And stress comes from a perception. If something happens, or some threat is made that something is going to happen, it's my perception of that thing that determines whether it's a stressor to me, right? It's how I feel about what happened, or how I think about what happened, that determines how I feel about it, right? And those things, like I said, they come from the outside. Inside stressors, like your immune system, pretty much wipes those out if your immune system is working properly, and you never know about those things. Now, for the stressors that come from the outside, a system in the body takes place. A system in the body takes over. The system is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. To keep it simple, from here on out, I will say the HPA. All right, so this system in the body takes over. And basically what happens is the brain perceptualizes how it perceives something. Right? So the brain looks at something and it says, this is how I perceive it. The pituitary gland then picks up that message and sends hormones to the adrenal glands, which sit on the kidneys, telling the adrenal glands that we're either growing or we're protecting. And like I said, in this case, we're talking about distress, so we're protecting. At that point, your adrenal glands release adrenaline. into the blood. All right, and adrenaline is the fight or flight hormone. Now, when I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about chronic stress. I'm talking about stress that lasts for days and weeks and months and years at a time. I'm not talking about acute stress. I'm not talking about you're walking down the street, some car backfires with some nasty exhaust, you inhale it. That's a stressor. It's a bad stressor. The body takes care of it because it was an event. It came and it went. All right, same thing. You're walking down the street, running down the street, fall, hit your knee, start bleeding. It was an event. All right, that type of acute stress, the body's totally prepared to handle that. When I'm talking about is the chronic stress, the stress that just won't stop. Okay, so when the adrenal glands release adrenaline, what adrenaline does is it pushes the blood from your viscera. Now the viscera is just basically say from your neck to your waist. It's your internal organs. Your heart, your lungs, your liver, your pancreas, small intestines, all of that. All right, so the blood is there, but when the fight or flight hormones kick in, the blood is pushed from the viscera into the extremities, into the arms and legs. Why? Because you got to fight or flight. All right, so the body is preparing to do one of those two things. Now, if the blood is pushed out of the viscera, out of the internal organs, at that point, your internal organs are no longer in growth, they are in protection. And that's important because you grow every day. All right, you literally lose trillions of cells every day. And every day your body has to grow. It has to replace these cells. If it can't do that, then you get sick and you die. All right, so that's extremely important. The first thing that stress does is it pushes the blood away from your internal organs and it stops them from being able to grow. Okay. Now, the next thing that it does is you have an immune system. All right. Now, the immune system is very, 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 very extremely complicated. Someone could probably do a 6-month lecture on the immune system and not do it justice. It's extremely complicated and it's extremely heavy in the nutrients that it needs in order to work properly. Like, it's really heavy in what it uses and it's extremely complicated, right? But the immune system focuses on threats from the inside. All right? The immune system has nothing to do with threats from the outside unless there's a cut or a gash or something like that. But at that point, that's not a threat. That's something happened. That was trauma. The threat hasn't happened. Remember, we're talking about stress, and stress generally comes in the form of threats and things that could happen and perceptions, not, a brick literally falls on my head. That's a different kind of stress. All right. So when the body is in this stress all the time, on the outside, the immune system shuts down on the inside to conserve energy because the immune system says, well, the fight isn't happening here, the fight's happening out there, so let me turn off. So stress over an extended period of time not only pushes blood away from your internal organs, pushing them into a protection and not growth, and growth is where you want to be, but it also causes your immune system to turn off because it's no longer needed, right? And when do you get sick? You get sick when your immune system isn't working right? And then people say things like, well, I caught a cold or I caught this. And that's really a misnomer because every pathogen known to man just about exists in all of us right now. Everything is already there. The thing is, these pathogens can't express themselves in a healthy body, right? Now, they're given one generic term, these pathogens that live in all of us, and they're called opportunistic organisms. Google that, look it up. This is what science calls them, opportunistic organisms. And what they are sicknesses and diseases that already live in you, but cannot express themselves if you are healthy. They can only express themselves when your immune system turns itself off. Your immune system only turns itself off naturally in prolonged stress situations. Okay? So distress now does two things. It pushes the blood from the viscera, from the internal organs, out to the extremities. Now our internal organs are not in growth. All right, remember we're losing 1 trillion to 2 trillion every day. We have to be able to replace those, but we're not in growth. We're in protection. All right, and because we're in protection from an exterior threat, the immune system breaks down, and then you get these opportunistic organisms that step in and cause diseases. And then, like I said, somebody says, I caught this, I caught that. No, you didn't. You didn't catch it. You already had it. Your body just couldn't express it. Okay? Well, the third thing that these adrenal hormones do, remember I said, the way that the blood leaves the viscera and goes into the extremities is that these hormones shut off the blood vessels. They shut it off so the blood can't flow to the viscera. It has to be pushed into the extremities. Well, the same thing happens inside the brain. All right, in the back you have the hindbrain, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for reflex and reaction. And in the front you have the forebrain, which is the part of the brain responsible for cognitive thinking. All right. Well, in a fight or flight situation, which part of the brain do you think you need? Do you need to be thinking or do you need to be reacting? Fight or flight, you need to be reacting. So these same hormones also squeeze the blood vessels off in the forebrain, pushing all the blood to the back of the brain, which makes you less intelligent. Okay? Stress, distress for long periods of time cause your body to go into protection so that it cannot regenerate, causes your immune system to shut itself off, which makes your body susceptible to all of the opportunistic organisms that already live inside of you. And on top of all of that, to add insult to injury, it closes down the blood flow of blood from the front of your brain, pushes that blood to the hindbrain, making you less intelligent. This is what stress does to the human body. And remember I said that it's all about the perception. The cells in the petri dish moved towards food or away from a toxin based off their perception. How did the cell perceive it to be? Right? Now this is really important because if we move ahead in time, and I can't remember the name of the article, but I will put a link to it in the description. It was a British biologist who did an experiment, and what he did was he took an enzyme that had a deficiency. The enzyme already had something wrong with it. The lactase. Lactase is the thing that eats lactose. Like if you're lactose intolerant, it's because your lactase doesn't work. So he took organisms that already had something wrong with the lactase. Lactase did not work. And he put these organisms into a petri dish, and then the only thing he put in the petri dish on the other side was lactose. So these organisms can't eat lactose, but he put lactose in the petri dish with the organisms, and you would expect, according to Darwinism, nothing happens because they can't eat, they can't regenerate, they can't do anything because they can't eat. You would expect nothing to happen. That's not what happened. Within a matter of days, there were colonies of cells popping up all over the petri dishes. And this is like, wait, how did this happen? This shouldn't be able to happen. And upon further research, what they found was that the cells changed the DNA. Right? They changed the DNA, and specifically they changed the DNA that had to do with lactase. They evolved. They were in a bad situation and they adapted to it. Right? And that is huge because that shows that perception is just that, is perception. Something can happen and it's all about how you choose to view it. Okay, you can look at it as a problem, and if it's a problem, you're going to go into this stress response, and these stresses are going to have all these negative effects on your body, which is only going to feed the premise that whatever you perceive to be a problem and then the problem gets bigger, and then you perceive it bigger, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth, and you literally create your own monster that doesn't exist, but that monster that doesn't exist then harms your body that does exist. And this is how stress hurts you. But that's also how you have the ability to control the stress. Because remember, at a cellular level, we see that it's all about the perception. It's all about how the cell views the situation. Because when you put the cell in a situation where it had no choice but to adapt and do something, it did it. All right, so the cell was able to change its perception, and in changing its perception, it was able to save its life. However, when the cells are in, a hormonal bath of adrenaline and cortisol, then they just don't have a chance. They just don't have a chance because the blood is forced out of the viscera, so they can't grow. It's not even they don't want to grow. They just can't. Okay, the immunity is lowered, so now you get sick really easy, and you always have this happening or that happening or this happening, and then you go to a doctor who pumps you full of more drugs and more chemicals, which are also stress, and they're also distressors in the body, which just snowballs and makes it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So basically what I'm saying to you is you have to find a way to deal with the stress. And finding a way to deal with the stress starts with the perception that you have about the stressful situation. Think about it from this point of view. Look back over your entire life, however long that may be, and think about every stressful situation that could have happened. And think about how many actually did. Think about how many things you stressed about, you worried about, you thought about, you stayed up late, you lost sleep, didn't have an appetite, and nothing happened. Or if it did happen, it didn't even affect you. You're still here. Right? So it's all perception. Everything is perception. It's all about how you look at it. And how you look at it is powerful because how you look at it determines the biology that's taking place inside your body. You can literally make yourself sick. You can literally put your body in a state where it's just going to get sick and die. And at that point, there's no positive attitude. I mean, you have to change the perception. Right? If your perception is still of a threat over here, but you say, I'm going to be positive about the disease over here, and then you're spitting in the wind. It doesn't work that way. The perception has to change because it's the perception that causes the stress. Think about that. It's the perception that causes the stress, not the other way around. I'm Coach Mike with Elite Performance, and until next time, remember I want to see you happy and healthy. Take care, guys.